The City of Plymouth City Council regular meeting for Thursday, April 27th, 2023 is now called to order. In-person participation by the public is permitted, and remote/electronic public participation is also available via Zoom and by following the instructions on the agenda. Members of the public participating electronically via this link and wishing to speak may do so during public comment by using the raised hand feature in the Zoom webinar. When dialing into Zoom at the phone number listed above, on your phone, use *9 to raise and lower your hand. Use *6 to mute and unmute your phone. This meeting will be recorded. May we please have a roll call?
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Here.
Councilmember Kleinfelter,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sim,
Here.
Mayor Ackerland.
Here.
Thank you.
Would everybody please rise for the flag salute?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 2, approval of City Council regular meeting agenda for tonight, April 27th, 2023. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay. Can we please have a roll call vote?
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Sim,
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 3, public comment. Under provisions of the California Code, the City Council, citizens wishing to address the council for any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time by completing and submitting a speaker submittal form to the city manager or following the instructions noted on this agenda. Speakers will be called by the mayor at the point on the agenda when the item will be heard. Speakers are encouraged to keep comments to 3 minutes or less and to state their name and community of residence, but doing so is not required. Under provisions of the California Government Code, the City Council is prohibited from materially discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or an urgent need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. So I'd like to open to public comment now. Is there anybody here in City Hall who would like to speak during public comment?
Hi,
Hi.
glad to see everyone. I was wandering around yesterday and wanted to see what was on the agenda. And so I went to the park and I realized, summer's coming again and we don't have the shade structure anymore. And I was wondering if there's any progress or do anything with that or any thought with it, but it needs, the farmer's market's coming up, and last year I actually went and bought 7 umbrellas in there for to get them through the end of the season after it went down. But I'd like to see if we can get some action or take a look and see what they're going to do with that, or if anything.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here in City Hall who would like to speak during public comment? Okay, I'll ask if there's anybody on Zoom, and I see one hand raised.
Yes, Stephanie Moreno.
Okay, Stephanie Moreno, we're ready for you, if you can hear us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ackerland, members of the City Council. I'm here tonight to ask you to act on behalf of the residents you were elected to represent in this town with regards to the closure, unexpected closure of the playground located next to the fairgrounds that many of the town residents use after hours and have done so for decades. It was locked and secured, preventing public access without any notice to the people in town. I'm assuming the city did not receive notice because I didn't see anything on the consent agenda under correspondence. There was no public input taken to make this decision. This particular location is used by many people after hours. If you drive by at any time, you will probably see numerous people out there either playing basketball, using the playground, or playing soccer, or walking for exercise. This is a serious issue, I think, for the town of Plymouth because number one, again, there was no public input into this issue to give us advance notice. Number two, there are no other facilities of this nature in town, unlike some of the other towns in the county of Amador. We don't have a menu of options that we can use to recreate on such a big piece of parcel, especially with the infrastructure that's there. It's also an equity issue, I believe, because the schools in Pioneer, Amador, and Jackson all are continuing to allow the public to use their facilities. They haven't had their gates shut and enforcement of keeping people out. Thirdly, it creates a more significant impact on those who live in town who don't have the economic means to join a club or travel to another location. This is a safe place for everybody to congregate, has been for a long time. And I'm just asking the city council to consider engaging on our behalf with the school district to evaluate what options there might be to allow us to continue to use the site while still protecting the school on its liability issue, which is what I'm hearing is the issue for the closure. Thank you for letting me make those comments.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody else on Zoom who would like to speak during public comment? I don't see any hands raised. Dana? Okay. Okay, I am now going to close public comment. We'll move on to item number 4, presentations, proclamations, appointments. And we have a presentation by John Colburn on the Blue Zone.
Good evening again. With me is
Microphone?
With me is Shannon Kritzner, and she's the one that's given the kick to the Blue Zone and moving us on. And we have before tonight we've been to Amador City, and we're in discussion with the city managers of the other 3 remaining cities. Anyway, we're going to have a video here. It's about 7 minutes of video, and then we'll answer any questions. But one of the things I want to let you know is that it's not a public funded thing. It's privately funded. There's no public monies in it, and what we're looking for right now, our purpose is to educate and show what's going on with the Blue Zone in other areas, and see if it's a fit for Amador County. We're working with the hospital and the other 5 cities, and we're hoping to bring Mill Creek Prison on board with us. And the purpose is not longevity and extending longevity on life. The whole purpose is preventive medicine and quality of life. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. With that, can we go to the screen? That's it.
What's the secret to longevity? In blue zones, parts of the world where people live the longest, have the right idea. But offer a quick fix, not a long-term solution. If you're overweight, it's probably not your fault. It's your fault. What's the secret to longevity? In blue zones, parts of the world where people live the longest, people don't try to live longer. It just happens to them. Over the last 10 years, our Blue Zones research team has traveled to 5 confirmed places where people live the longest. We discovered 9 common characteristics that help identify a path for up to 12 extra years of a healthier life. How? Let's start with some facts. We know that only 20% of how long the average individual lives is because of genes. The other 80% is lifestyle and environment. We spend $110 billion a year on diets, exercise programs, and supplements. Some have the right idea, but offer a quick fix, not a long-term solution. If you're overweight, it's probably not your fault. Candy bars, sugary drinks, and salty snacks tempt us where we work, shop, and socialize. More than half our calories come from junk food. No wonder 2/3 of us are overweight. Science shows that self-control can take us only so far in improving our health. Eventually, we have to improve our surroundings. We make hundreds of mindless decisions every day that affect our health. By changing small things like the proximity of food in your kitchen, making the active option the easy option by getting a dog and getting rid of mechanical conveniences, you can start adding years to your life. Blue Zones has gathered all the best practices in the world for creating a healthy environment and produced a list of best practices for people and communities to choose from. For individuals, it starts by taking the Blue Zones Personal Pledge. This free pledge helps make the healthy choice in your life the unavoidable choice. The pledge helps you move naturally all day long, have less stress in your life, make it easier to eat more nutritious food with fewer calories, and connect more with the right people. On the community level, we start by examining all of the things that influence our everyday lives. Since most people spend their time within 10 miles of their homes and work, we focus on their life radius. We have over 150 evidence-based interventions, nudges, and defaults that have worked elsewhere. Then we work with city leaders and organizations to choose the ones that are right for their communities. We optimize building designs for better health. We've identified changes that can help people at schools, grocery stores, restaurants, and workplaces eat less, eat better, move more, and connect socially. We help people find their purpose, their passions, strengths, and help them find a place to put those gifts to work in the community. We know that volunteers weigh less, have lower medical costs, and have higher well-being than people who don't volunteer. Science shows behaviors and attitudes are contagious. So we help connect groups of people ready to change their health with other like-minded people. Others around them start to do the same. Pretty soon, an entire community can change for the better, and the Blue Zones Project is here to help. Our experts work directly with your community to develop the expertise, motivate the masses, and reverse engineer your physical environment for a perfect storm of influence that leads to a critical mass of change. Blue Zones Project cities have seen obesity and smoking rates drop while seeing their well-being rise. This adds up to not only millions of dollars in savings, but more importantly, a better place for our children to grow up. Take the pledge today. At first, it takes some commitment, but before you know it, it'll be second nature to live longer, better.
There's one more 3-minute thing that just kind of tells you what, how it's actually working in Hawaii.
Where does the poop go? Really? If someone's backed up.
sorry. I have them all to you then. Say they're not there.
That's pretty good then.
Do tell, where does it go?
It's often constipated for 2, 3 days, or even a week. Where does it all go? In fact, new findings reveal it's likely Elvis died from constipation and not a heart attack.
Oh, there we go.
Is a happy, healthy Hawaii where people are empowered to care for Blue Zones Project. Our vision is a happy, healthy Hawaii where people are empowered to care for each other and their community. Ultimately, we want you to live longer, better. In Blue Zones areas, the places in the world where people live the longest, they don't try to live longer, it just happens to them. Blue Zones Project is built on these well-researched longevity secrets of these areas and brings them to life in our neighborhoods, homes, and families. We know that only 20% of how long an individual lives is because of their genes. The other 80% is lifestyle and environment. Our mission is to enhance the well-being of Hawaii's people by continually improving the environments where we live, work, and play to make the healthy choice the easy choice. We embarked on this mission in 3 small communities in 2015. Through a local grassroots effort, we work to provide healthier options in the areas we frequent most. We quickly grew and have impacted more than 110,000 people and volunteers throughout the state in 8 communities on Maui, Oahu, and Hawaii Islands. We've also helped over 1,000 businesses implement well-being practices throughout their workplace, many of whom started walking groups, provide healthier options at work, and encourage coworkers to connect and gather socially. Across Hawaii, BZP employers such as the Queens Medical Center West Oahu, Hawaiian Telcom, and the County of Hawaii have seen a 34% reduction in turnover, 27% decrease in obesity among employees, and a 60% increase in average employee performance. We address social determinants of health by working with community partners to implement best practices for people, places, and policy within an individual's life radius, or the places near their home where they spend their time. These places include grocery stores we shop in regularly, the schools our children go to, and the sidewalks we use on a daily basis. As we forge ahead, our focus is to leverage our proven strategies that have improved well-being in our 8 communities to expand this critical work throughout the state of Hawaii. We want to build upon these successes created over the past 7 years and continue to harness the energy of our community leadership teams and network across the islands to rebuild, refocus, and revitalize our home states. We hope that you will join us as we strive to motivate healthy changes that will enable us all to live longer better, just like those who live in the Blue Zones.
Neurologists are stunned. They've confirmed that ear ringing is shrinking your brain cells. Tonight is
This is a meeting and a show here. My name is Shannon. Thank you again so much for taking the time to have us with you today. We just kind of took some time to address the what of the Blue Zones, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about why we should bring the Blue Zones to Amador County and why Amador County deserves this project here. The Blue Zones and Amador County itself is really a great place to be. We have so much natural beauty, especially this time of year. We have really, really, really good people here. We have great wine and beer and among many other things. But one of the things that's kind of underlying in the county is really this existence of troubling health statistics that's proven to be a pretty big barrier in our county for the residents to truly thrive. When we've worked with the Sutter Health and they've looked at the studies that they've done, we've come to notice that Amador County's averages of death and mortality due to preventable disease are more than double the state averages. I believe you all got a piece of paper to look at the statistics of some of those statistics earlier, but looking at some of this stuff, we're noticing stroke, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and cancer, all things that are considered preventable, to be more than double the state average. We're also doubling the state average for the presence of diabetes, as well as excessive drinking and smoking. When we look at these statistics, one of the things that you can kind of take note of and consider is that we do have an older population. That's a really valid point, something that is worth looking at, but there's two things that I really like to consider when looking at the Blue Zones project and the presence of in looking at the age of our county and these health statistics. The first is that our children mortality rate is also double the state average. So if it was just the aging population, that wouldn't necessarily be a driver. Secondly, the point of the Blue Zones project is to create an environment where people can age gracefully without being kind of pressured with these preventable diseases that are contributing to these mortality, things that we know lifestyle choices are willing to or are able to make those changes for. So by bringing the Blue Zones project into Amador County, we are creating an opportunity really to create a generations to come this place that instead of living in the lowest 36th percentile of the state for health statistics, we're in the upper 36th percentile for health statistics. Before I close up kind of on my side of things here, I want to thank you, but I also want to leave you with a commonly known Greek proverb that many of us have heard. It goes something along the lines of, a society grows great when old men plant trees for the shade that they know they will never sit in. Thank you.
So, well, we're moving forward. It's very heartwarming to us, the reception we're getting from all the communities. And the only thing we would like to have from the city in one of the next meetings is a letter of interest in moving forward. We have the attention of the CEO of the Blue Zone. We had a meeting on Zoom with him a month ago with all the cities were involved. And he wants to come out and spend a week out here and talking to all the stakeholders and further address how we might move forward with this. It's going to be privately funded. It's very possible it'll be funded by Center Health or one of the other large stakeholders. And those large stakeholders would be the large employees. One of those is Mill Creek Prison that has 3,000 employees. And of course, Jackson Rancheria has over 1,000 employees. So we're just wanting to move forward with the investigation of that and get Nick Booten here to look at it. Currently, how I got involved with this is my granddaughter Bailey was working at Taylor Farms in Salinas, and they were talking about Blue Zones 4 years ago. And I got in touch with Mel Welch, and we started looking at it and thought, well, this would be a great fit for Amador County. Then pandemic hit, so we stopped on it. And then we cranked it up 2 months ago. And so we're trying to move forward with it. The idea, of course, is not to try to change the world, but if we can get some of these mortality rates down, if we could get down to the state average, it would be unbelievable. But so with that, we're just leave it up to you people to maybe put it on the agenda and give us a letter of interest. Thank you. Any questions?
I was wondering, John, if it would be appropriate for the city to declare a partnership by resolution. So it's a formal declaration. We have not really considered that. It probably would be. It's just a strong yes. And that would be very helpful if they want to go to that. And we don't need a letter of
we're not trying to convince anybody to do this without the education. So, anyway, yes. Any other questions? Your mayor sat in on that initial meeting and it was pretty impressive. The initial meeting we had, the Center of Health in Jackson, Michael, forgot his last name, it's the first time he'd been involved with Blue Zone at all. And he says, this is exactly what we need. In that meeting, he says, we have hard time maintaining, getting doctors and RNs here. And part of it is because of the community. What do we show? Do we have exercise paths? Do we have the trails and the bicycle paths and walkways and stuff? Do we have the cooperation of the community and trying to have work with preventive medicine? And he says, this is really, really what we need here.
I'd just like to make a statement because of the citizens, and I'll speak for our whole county. And of course, my parents and people of my parents' generation and their age, I've noticed a real sense of loneliness with certain individuals who I've known my whole life at this stage in life. And John, I can remember when John first brought this up to my attention, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. But I was thinking about more of the health benefits from the exercise and stuff. Something that could input a social gathering, social connection. I think it's something that we've really lost in the last 4 years just because of what we've been through as a world. I think would be probably one of the most positive things that we could see in this county. I've always had high respect for like our senior center where they gather for lunch and things of that nature. But I've always said we need more of that. Amador County as a whole is basically a retirement community. And not that I don't consider myself youth, even though I was called youth and a baby already tonight. But I know that the youth population is still here. So to change from at an age point and then going forward, if we can, John and you and I have talked about it many times. I'm very supportive of this.
Yeah, one of the big pushes that you see in all the Blue Zone stuff is community activities, and they have these your close knit friends. They try to make groups of 4 or 5 people walk together every other day or something. And one of the things they mentioned in there, there's one of the 9 things is a faith. Most of these have a faith-based religion. In addressing that, they say the biggest benefit of that is the gathering once a week of all the people and the social gathering and how it reduces stress and everybody can get together. And I know we've talked about Keith and I talked a lot about mental health and the almost absent involvement with trying to do mental health here in Amador County. And that's one of the things that the medical community to us is they say, great, keep charging on, even if this doesn't go through. We need to make the community aware of we got these problems and they need to be addressed.
Okay. Oh, do you have a question, comment?
I have a question for the young lady. Do you think the biggest factor is in this county with regards to your statistics is obesity?
So
Maybe you've done the math here as
Right,
far as
right.
what's causing this issue that we're dying so young in this county versus other state levels?
I wouldn't across the board contribute it to that because when the Sutter Health does the statistical analysis for the health measures, they also go into the community with focus groups and ask about the kind of needs in the county as well. The two the top two are access to primary care as well as access to mental health services. So primary care can have a lot to do with obesity, but primary care can also look like I didn't have time or I couldn't quite get in time to go get a scan from the doctor. And now I have stage 3 cancer, or I didn't have time, or I didn't feel like I should go get this test done. So I ignored it until it became an overwhelming problem. In regards to mental health, we see a lot of issues with drugs in this county, and as well as in the younger populations. I know a lot of people in the schools experiencing a lot of mental health issues as far as like the kids are concerned. So on the physical health parameters, that might be the case that there is a level of obesity in the county, but I would say it's a little more complicated than that. I can't give you a straightforward answer.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a quick comment. I just want to thank you both for bringing this forward. I think we're at a great time in this community with our, the Caltrans starting granted a short segment, but still a walking bike trail to start connecting our community so that we can walk and exercise safely and, from the physical activity side of things. And I'm fully supportive of us, whether it's a resolution or whatever is deemed appropriate. I'm in full support, and thank you for bringing this to us tonight. Thank you.
What the Blue Zone is, they don't try to tell you how to live. They try to make it convenient to live healthy. And they bring in a lot of grants in these cities. As an example, Mary Ann, remember on our meeting, Jackson was after a walking trail grant, and also Sonora was. And because Sonora had the Blue Zone, had everything in place, they were picked over Jackson as far as the grant funding for their trails. So we're going to keep marching forward, and hopefully that you'll look forward to writing a letter or get it on your future agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Item number 5, consent calendar items. All matters listed under the consent calendar are to be considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless, before the City Council votes on the motion to adopt, members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion and action. Item 5.1, correspondence. 5.2, approve the regular meeting minutes of April 13th, 2023. 5.3, approve resolution 2023-21, making findings necessary to continue to conduct Brown Act meetings virtually. Is there anybody from the public here in City Hall that has any comments on item 5, the consent calendar items? Okay. Anybody on Zoom have any comments? No.
Not at this time.
Okay. I'll close this to public comment.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Do we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter. Aye. Vice Mayor Sim,
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Item number 6, public hearings. There are none. Item 7, regular agenda items. Item 7.1, receive report on code enforcement activities. Could we please have a staff report?
So I'm going to start off and then I will pass the baton. So this is what will be the first of the annual reports on code enforcement activity. We should be getting an annual activity on code enforcement activity as well as annual activities on other things that we're doing. I know it hasn't been done in the past, but it will begin. I want to introduce Scott Cunningham. He is our code enforcement officer, and he is here and he is going to report on our code enforcement activities.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor and fellow City Council members. I'm going to start with a little bit of a summary as far as what we do, maybe provide a little background as to why we do what we do. I know there's oftentimes a lot of questions and confusion about what we can do, staying within the parameters of due process, and how we can navigate through the various codes, whether they be state regulations or municipal. And there is a hierarchy to it. And then at the end, I'd be happy to field any concerns or questions that you may have. So to start out, the Code Enforcement Division, for lack of a better name, is a complaint-based driven division with one exception. We'll get back to that. And we could even say possibly two exceptions, but basically it's complaint-based. The intent is to improve the quality of life and abate any life safety violations. Since its inception, there's been approximately 190 recorded interactions since we've instituted the GoGov software for reporting and tracking. A lot of the interactions that I've made, and I know others that have assisted me have made, are what I prefer to call knock and talk. The intent of the division is voluntary compliance. That doesn't always happen either. There's been initial conversations with certain parties that preceded myself, or the individuals aren't available, whatever the case may be. Obviously, there's nothing that's 100% that catches everything. But I like to do that because nobody likes to receive a letter from the city. I've received them in the past for various things, and they're frustrating, scary, and confusing. And oftentimes it's difficult to make your way through it and understand. So I would prefer to have that conversation up front. Like I said, it doesn't always happen. I've inherited some issues in the past, and we address those accordingly. But that's really where I'd prefer to go. And then what it does is it creates a better interaction, a better personal interaction with the city and the public. I'd prefer not to put it in the case file until it becomes necessary. I can think of an occasion here not too long ago. An individual had a large pile of brush. I happened to see him out working. I just kind of stopped by and said, hey, not for nothing, but any idea how long this is going to be here? We're heading into fire season, weed abatement. You know, it's against our nuisance ordinance. If you need some time, no harm, no foul. We're here to work with you. So that's typically how I'd prefer to navigate through the process. But of course, that doesn't always happen. You can't always make contact. And sometimes there's not much utility in it. Due process is incredibly important with what we do. That's fair and equal treatment under the law, which when it's complaint-based, it makes it nice because it is an issue for the quality of life in that area. We want to not provide preferential treatment, not do selective enforcement based on our own biases or picadillos, but when we get concerns or questions, we want to address them all equivalently. Now, we will certainly work with the citizens. The number one problem that people find when they're dealing with code violations is lack of communication or not following through. If you communicate and you make reasonable strides towards improvement, there's absolutely no reason why there should be any sort of penalty assessed. That doesn't always happen because people are people, and that's fine. But we frequently work with people to give them the opportunity to correct the violation. A good example is maybe they need to shield something from the public view, build a fence, or obtain a permit, whether it's an operational permit, a building permit, whatever the case may be. So we want to give them the opportunity to correct it. Gosh, this is going to date myself, probably 34 years of public service. Most of the people are pretty innocent, that they just don't know all the codes. None of you do. I don't either. That's why we have them online to refer to. So I try to make it an educational experience. Currently, the city of Plymouth utilizes what's called the administrative process. That's notice, sometimes an additional notice, although it's not required. And then it goes into an administrative citation where penalties are assessed. You can recover costs of doing business, whether it's an abatement cost, my time, if we have to have somebody come out and address it from the city, whatever the case may be, those get assessed at that time. There is a maximum. I've only gotten to the maximum once in 34 years, and that's $100,000 per year. And that's a government code. And then oftentimes people ask, well, or maybe the violator will say, you know, I've got this citation, what do I do? Well, you're afforded due process, like I mentioned at the very beginning. There is a adopted and codified appeals process. That information is provided at the time of the issuance of the citation. They need to follow those codified procedures, and then a determination can be made. If, for instance, an appeal is not requested and the citation is not made correct with the city, what we are looking at doing is direct assessment. Those citations for cost recovery, abatement costs, and so forth can then be placed on the assessor's tax roll. Oftentimes cities will do it depending on their legal interpretation with outstanding utility bills. You know, every municipality is different. It's whatever the city attorney feels that he or she can defend if it is appealed in Superior Court. So that's sort of where we're at now. But that's only a portion of the tool belt that's available. We don't currently utilize everything that's possible in this city. It's because we just haven't probably had the resources, expertise, interest, whatever the case may be. Obviously, whatever direction that we go from Margaret on down, we need your support. Without that, we are not too useful. So without council backing, there's very little we can do. But what I'm proposing to do in the future, just adding tools to our tool belt, is looking at some of our codes and not just making them infractions, but making them misdemeanors and or infractions. That opens up the door for other enforcement mechanisms. I've been fortunate enough to go through much of the post academy and can legally issue various criminal citations. There's advantages to that and disadvantages. The advantage is it removes any impartiality from the city being the arbitrator of an appeal. You go before judge or magistrate and you have zero conflict of interest. The downside to the violator, they get to explain to the judge why they chose not to abate their issue. How penalties are assessed and collected. The city typically, if you go through a criminal citation process, loses quite a bit of that money because of court fees. But the goal isn't to generate funds, it's to improve the quality of life and remove the violation. But it's just another tool, and you get a notice to appear. If you don't show, it's like any other citation. A bench warrant is issued and it will get resolved in due time. We have also discussed in certain circumstances if a particular abatement is too much for the city to handle, there's always the avenue of assessing civil penalties up to $1,000 a day. Again, these civil penalties would end up on the tax roll, which is quite an encouragement to abate whatever violation that particular parcel may have. In 34 years, I've used it maybe half a dozen times. They're the extreme of the extreme. I don't know of any instance currently that would be applicable, but if it's in the code and it's on the books, it's available. It's always tough trying to play catch up with the code when you're trying to address a particular issue. I wanted to talk about, again, with due process and the issue of preferential treatment and or selective enforcement. Every time I get a new city council, chief of police or city manager, I have this conversation with them and I let them know that beware of your political influence and beware of what you say. When we start going down preferential treatment based on who we are, who we know, or we pick a particular issue or property, that leads to grand jury inquiries. I've testified in front of several grand juries, and I always throw out that as a cautionary tale. We have to make certain we treat everybody the same. So that's just something I like to add. Now, I said we get back to complaint-based versus proactive. There's one major and one not as major, or I should say less frequently occurring. And that's, of course, this time of the year, we're heading into weed abatement. In my personal opinion, that's a life safety issue. We will go out, assess various parcels, look for them, identify them, and notice them. That is probably our major proactive item that we will look for. Secondly, would be any other health, life safety issue. Somebody's discharging sewage. Maybe there's a down power line, a tree that could encroach into the public right of way that has been, I don't know, hit by a vehicle or just due to age. So if we see it, we address it. But, you know, the more, I would say, subjective municipal codes that are just not pretty to look at, we're not going to go after it. If it's not bothering the neighbors, we're not going to go after it. We just don't have the resources to do it. And it creates a lot of animosity between the public and the city. So that's the exceptions there. Let's see, I'm just kind of looking my notes over here. See if there's anything else. Another reason why I caution against proactive enforcement. Everybody has their thing. Everybody has their own picadillos, their own biases. I can take all of us in a room, look at it for 30 minutes, and ask each one of us what we observed. We're all going to have different things. I don't see everything. I may see one issue at one particular parcel and miss it at another because there's something even more egregious. And it took my concentration away for that particular issue. So I caution against proactive enforcement unless it's very simple, very obvious. And that's why I suggest weed abatement is really the only avenue we go down unless there's something that comes up. I know in other jurisdictions, maybe it's RVs parked in the front of a home on the driveway and they wanted them shielded from view. You do something like that, fine, that's reasonable, it's obvious, you can see it, you can't miss it. But I caution against proactive enforcement. It's not the greatest practice, especially in a smaller community. And the resources just don't really allow it. My other, I guess, comment and or concern is we've instituted the GoGov app as well as the software. I'm a little disappointed at its lack of use. I don't know if we're not promoting it well enough. I know at the time when it was instituted, there was something on our webpage that was right there in your face. I went through it, matter of fact, a couple of days ago to try and find it on our website. I know how to get to it, and it was still a little tough to find. There's tremendous utility in using it, and I would promote it as council members and as staff. One thing is it gives the complainant ownership in that particular concern that they have. The other thing it does is it holds me accountable for whomever has to touch or address that request. It's trackable. There's a number associated with it. If you make the complaint, you can go back in, just put in that number, and you know what's going on. If you provide a legitimate email, you will get updates when that request was touched and what's going to occur from that point forward. Now, what I don't do, because I don't have the time or the resources, I'm not going to go back and forth and have or update an individual on every single instance or issue that's going on with a particular case. One, it's probably not appropriate. And two, the idea is for them, the citizen, to know that we've got the request and that we're going to look into it and address it appropriately. And that from that point forward, we'll address it with the recorded property owner or the responsible party, depending on that particular issue. If they want to call and they want an update, that's fine. You know, sometimes things happen where they say, hey, you know, I reported that 6 weeks ago and it's still there. No, I understand. They had a vacation plan to Europe. They're going to be gone for 4 weeks. They gave me a copy of their itinerary. It's going to be addressed 2 weeks after they get back. I don't mind that sort of communication. I appreciate it. It educates the public and they understand, oh, okay, the city is aware. It will be addressed. So that's how I handle those particular issues. I don't like email because I've found, depending on the spam filters, a lot of communications end up there. I checked some here right before I got started here as I was writing notes. I found a couple of questions from some citizens. I don't know why it kicks them into spam, but if you go through the online reporting to ask a question, report an issue, it's real simple. It provides accountability and it's able to be tracked. And I can run not as many reports as I'd like, but over time we can customize applicable reports to meet the needs of the agency. So with that, do any of you folks have any questions or concerns, comments?
Should we open it to public comments first, or do you want to go?
We're going to be on public comment for a minute, I think, too.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess my big question is about the weed abatement thing. And that's my industry that I'm in. So with seasons like we've just had, I mean, what kind of variances do you use with weed abatement? I mean, if you came to my house today and said, hey, you got your weeds are too high, you need to get your weeds down and everything else, I'm going to go, oh, well, ain't that the pot calling the kettle black? Because I see that the city of Plymouth has weeds all over and I know that maintenance is trying to catch up on it. But, you know, wow, look at that. So I just wanted to know what kind of variances you use in those situations. And I will say that a lot of the materials are not working this year.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what I have done in the past is I give everybody, and this goes back into due process.
Okay.
So I've done this 2 different ways. And I'll explain the way I don't like first. What some municipalities have done is they will go through, they'll do all these inspections, say for the first month. Then they send out all of these notices. Well, for some jurisdictions, there's been 2,500 notices that go out. 1 or 2 people doing that, they don't go all out the same day, the same week, the same half of the month. But then they all have the same due date. Well, you've lost due process. The notices that went out first got 30 days. The notices that went out last got 2 weeks. In my mind, that's not fair. So what I do is as you run across these particular issues, you generate the notice, you send it out, Everybody gets the same amount of time to abate the issue. So if I were to send out a notice today, you would have until May 27th. If I sent one out Monday, you would have until June 1st. Everybody's afforded the same amount of time to comply. Now then, you pick up the phone and say, hey, my mower's in the shop. I pick it up on the 10th of May. No problem. Note goes in the file. Not everybody's going to have the same convenience.
And I guess I totally understand that part of it. I guess what my question and I'm having a hard time explaining this. When is there a threshold that you guys have before you address someone? I guess on it. Is it after, well, I've driven by this piece of property and the weeds have been up for 2 weeks?
So
3 weeks.
what I would say is, when does it constitute a fire hazard? If I drive by a green pasture and it's 18 inches tall, is that a fire hazard? Probably not.
It depends on who you ask. I
Well-
mean, honestly, on that.
What I would then do is refer to my training as a fire marshal. Not only am I code enforcement officer, I'm a certified building official and fire marshal. So I do have that training and that knowledge to look at that and say, is that a fire hazard? And obviously, the authority having jurisdiction has the latitude to make that determination. So if it's because let's say the farmer is growing hay and it's allowed to get tall and it's green, that's not a fire hazard. At some point in time, depending on the zoning, you may have maintenance standards that would require that, green or not. But we do weed abatement based on fire hazard. And because we're in a moderate zone, it's a little different than going further up the hill, and much different than going down the hill because of density of combustibles. So what I do is I use CAL FIRE's definitions, and then I would look at our municipal code and then work with what Amador County Fire District is doing. And I've had several conversations with their fire marshal and chief on trying to improve that relationship, because there's been a problem, as I understand it, in the past, where we have abutting jurisdictions, and I'm trying to eliminate those particular problems. Obviously, that will be a fluid situation.
And of course, I mean, I'm just trying to be fair and kind of be transparent to get these answers out.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it isn't that I'm,
No, not at
question
all.
on it. And then,
They're good questions.
on Sunday afternoons, I have one neighbor. I don't know, I might have multiple neighbors, but I have one neighbor that thinks I'm summoning demons out of my garage when I'm playing music. And we've had talks about this, but I could see this if this neighbor and I didn't have a good enough relationship where we could talk to each other, which thank God I live on a block that we all communicate, we all talk to each other. I could see this getting into a real pissing contest, because I could say, oh, you're going to call about a noise ordinance. Okay, now I'm going to call every time you fire up your lawnmower, or vice versa. How do you control something? Because it's, most of your calls are from the neighbor called and said, hey, their fence looks like this or whatever.
You can't correct irrational behavior.
Okay.
You can't.
I mean,
You
because it
can
would
have a
get like that. Yeah.
conversation. I've been in the middle of the Hatfield and McCoys for years. And when the city can't remedy it, there's other remedies. There's civil court. So it depends on what that particular issue is. But when you're dealing with irrational behavior, all you can do is be professional and kind, assess the situation, and make whatever moves you can legally make. And sometimes I've been a peacekeeper and a peacemaker, saying, look, guys, stop it. We're adults. That sometimes helps, but it doesn't help all the time. And I can think of several instances where I've dealt with that. And unfortunately, there's no code that prevents having a terrible neighbor. So,
Thank you.
yep, I've dealt with it.
Okay, I don't want to add too much to this already lengthy agenda item, but so mine is not a question, it's more a comment. You started, and thank you for the presentation. You started out by explaining our complaint-based, the way we do business, which I've referred to it as the common sense rule. It's like, let's have common sense about whether this is an appropriate complaint or not. But then you went all the way into discussing misdemeanors and potential felonies against our citizens.
Well, I never mentioned felony.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make myself heard that your own graphs here have zeros all over them about the number of complaints, the number of open cases. So that's a giant leap from a complaint-based and working formula and going into taking some type of legal actions against people unless it's incredibly egregious. So that was my comment.
Correct.
Councilmember Kleinfelter, I ran that report and I ran the wrong report. I didn't know how to run the report. So those numbers aren't completely accurate. He can run reports better than I can. I am unfamiliar with that program. And so those aren't completely accurate numbers. They're the best numbers I could pull from the system when I ran the numbers. And I couldn't get a hold of Scott in his real job. So those were the numbers I could access from the system. The numbers that he gave you tonight were true actual numbers that he pulled from the system. So
Yeah,
I don't know that those are what our actual open case numbers are.
From experience of being here, the way we do business is working. And we don't have that many complaints if you look at per capita. So we're all neighbors and we'd like to be able to keep it that way as much as possible.
I would agree with that. For the most part, we get complaints.
Yeah, we're about 93% compliance with the first letter. Very, very few citations go out. And that's very typical of most municipalities. Rarely do you see it under 90%.
You've been here for a couple of years now, or about a year
A
and a half.
couple years, July.
How do you feel about our municipal code when it comes to the city codes that we have on the books? Are they any updating? Do you feel they're current? Do you feel they should be reconsidered, looked over?
So I've had this
modified?
conversation with past city management. Now, obviously, there's been a bit of a rotating door, unfortunately. And direction has been, until here recently, lacking. And it's nobody's fault because I don't think anybody had the standing to make that decision. So I've reviewed a lot of the stuff. There's a lot of conflicts within the code. What I suggest when you do a code review is you take a look at the direction you want the city to go. You can regulate the heck out of anything, but that doesn't make it effective and or efficient. So, like Councilman Kleinfelter said, common sense is great, but sometimes common sense is not so common. And even here, I go out and I look at certain things and I go, okay, there's the letter of the law and there's the color of the law. And so much of it is gray. And I prefer to live in the gray. You know, before we get to the instance of a citation or whether you do a criminal cite or whatever the case may be, it has to be fairly egregious. The problem that I see with our code is the administrative section does not remove enough of the conflict of interest. Other jurisdictions will say, okay, if you have a citation, you bring in a hearing officer from out of the area. It's cheap to pay for that service. And it's worth its weight in gold in case you end up in Superior Court. You don't have that conflict of interest, and that's why the criminal citation is so effective, because it removes that conflict of interest. When you typically do a outside hearing officer, that comes at a price. The, for lack of a better term, violator has to pay that appeals fee up front. You go to court, you don't have to. There's no cost to going to court. And typically, especially nowadays, the judge says, address your violation and we will dismiss the fines. You'll pay the costs of abatement or whatever the case may be. You can dismiss fines, you cannot dismiss fees. And so I've found frequently going to court is far more lenient. So if you want to move in that direction to more tools that actually improves, I would say, the due process for the citizens, that would be something that I would recommend. There are some outdated codes. There are some things that can be added that could address particular issues. But I don't think you want to get so mired in the weeds that you bog down the citizens with over-regulation. I can think of, like, Fresno has a lead paint abatement. It's a fortune to do. All of these properties are painted with lead paint until you go up into Zinfandel Ridge. You don't want to go down that route so long as it's not being disturbed. So if there's particular concerns, I would say address those concerns. I don't like a shotgun approach.
Let me ask, has GoGov been a good tool? So far?
It's a great tool for case processing, tracking, adding documents, photographs.
Other than weed abatement, what couple items has it been used to address in the city of Plymouth?
Junk and debris is probably the number one. Yeah. Lots of junk and debris.
Visible junk and debris.
Visible junk and debris.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What about abandoned cars?
Depends on where they're at. We cannot enforce anything on the public right of way. That would go to the sheriff's office.
Got it.
So my authority ends at the property line.
We refer them out to the sheriff's office when we get them. Another one that comes through there are public records requests. We get a lot of public records requests through there.
Is GoGov, is it anonymous, or do you?
It can be.
It can be.
Mhm.
You choose whether you want to be identified.
It will ask for a last name. I put anonymous. If you fill out that field, it will allow you to submit. You would have to talk to the software engineers to allow those fields to remain vacant. But part of the beauty of it is there's a couple of things. If you can take a picture, you can make a complaint.
As long as you have
You have the app. It
Yeah,
goes
no problem.
directly into the system.
Sure.
If you provide a good email, you will get follow-up.
Does it go directly to you, or does it go to the city manager?
It depends on what the topic chosen would be. So if they were to pick potholes, it may go to Selby.
Sure.
It just depends on what item, and it's not a big deal if they pick the wrong thing. Typically from the description, if I get something that is not my area, I can reassign it to the appropriate individual with just click of a mouse.
Thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely.
That was very good.
Good evening, Mr. Cunningham. Thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you this evening. So, and thank you for your public service. I too spent my entire career in the fire service with code enforcement and whatnot. One thing for me, that I guess a value that I grew to espouse in my career was, striving to exceed expectations, right? And so, the knock and talk was, using your words, was as an absolute given for us, that we would never cite anybody without first talking with them, talking about the issue at hand and options for being able to mitigate that. And you mentioned it's important to you, and I'm just curious, in your interactions in the city, how often do you think do you knock and talk? Approximately what percentage of the complaints that you're following up on are involved with a knock and talk?
I would say it depends on the issue, depends on the history. And I would effort to guess at around 70-75% would be a guess. I mean, obviously, the nice thing, and it was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations, is oftentimes there's people home. But there's still a lot of this community that commutes that are not available. There's a lot of people that are suspicious about somebody that they don't recognize knocking on their door. So, that's another hurdle that we have to overcome. And, people have lives. They're at the grocery store, they're running errands. That's one thing. If you have to do much more than get the basics, you're heading out of town. So during the day when I'm here, that's when people are running their errands. So I try and catch them. I don't always. It's not required. That's not been codified within the code. But I think it's best practice.
When you do the knock and when you knock and nobody's home, do you leave a card, a note?
No. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll make a note. I keep a little notebook, and the next time I'm here, I'll go by. And I find frequently, if it's a pile of tree trimmings, a discarded washing machine on the driveway, it just hasn't been picked up yet. I come by in a week, it's gone. So it's just, I don't really want to cause that sort of, what's this about? Until it becomes something that we actually have to address.
Any other questions, comments? I remember a couple of years ago when the decision was made to create and fill this position. Part of the conversation with the previous city manager was, I think that the council emphasized that we wanted the folks to know that, take the knock and talk approach and also offer them any assistance that was reasonable. I know for me, for example, if I had a new washer and dryer delivered and they took the old one and put it on my driveway, if it wasn't for my husband and having a truck, I would not have the wherewithal to be able to get rid of that. And so I think we want to make sure that we extend to everybody so that they know, there's ambassadors available, or there's this going on in the community. There's these resources. And so I just want to state that it's important to me that really be emphasized, that we provide whatever support we can.
We just recently had an issue with a mattress.
Mhm.
And you can actually get money for the mattress. This individual is unaware of that. So you can call, drop it off free, and some places will actually pay $5 or $10 for the mattress. So when I've had discarded water heaters, and they probably didn't get permits, whatever. I'm not going to dig into that. But I say, hey, you can have a recycling company come pick it up. They're not as interested because those commodities have gone down in value. But I often say, reach out to the Boy Scouts, reach out to any social groups, any, the Rotary, anything like that. Because there's a lot of people that will help. where we can get in trouble is gift of public funds. The city can only do so much. So, you know, when I offer resources, they're more ideas, options that I've seen work in other jurisdictions and ones that I'm familiar with around here. So yeah, we try to do that. But again, if they don't make the communication and they work out of town or whatever the case may be, that's sometimes a very difficult thing to get done. So, you know, we do, when there's that avenue, whether it's, you know, phone, email, they come in, whatever the case may be, I will offer whatever ideas that I have. And, you know, I can think of utilizing the high school. A lot of times the seniors have to do some sort of public service project in a lot of communities. I don't know if they do that here, but that's another place that I refer people to check into.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'd like to go ahead and open this to public comment now. Anybody here in City Hall?
Steve Pinotti, Plymouth.
Yes.
You had mentioned several times that you could phone you. However, I was told by city staff that could not phone you, had to email you. I emailed you about a month ago, nothing. So
Your first name, Stephen?
Yes.
You were in my junk folder.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah.
So can
You
Can I
call, leave a
phone you?
message? Absolutely.
how do
Call,
I
leave a
get your
message.
phone number?
They can certainly provide it for you at the front counter.
Okay, well, they told me
Absolutely.
before there was no phone.
There is, it's on my notices.
Perfect.
That's fine. Yeah,
Thank you.
anytime. I'm here Friday mornings. Come on in.
Thank you. Anybody else here in City Hall who would like to speak during public comment?
Elizabeth Pinotti. I think that the online, whatever the GoGov,
Mhm.
GoGov, that's a great idea. I think that it might be a hurdle for some of our residents to jump through or even to access it, even if it was on the first, even if, as you go to City of Plymouth, even if it was there. I think that there's a level of knowledge to fill out an online complaint that not everybody here would have. And I think that some sort of outreach that it's available and maybe even walking some, because I can think of my neighbors who complain to me, but would never be able to walk through that. So I think that some way to get maybe our older residents or people that don't necessarily have the technology to do it. I know they could go to the library and use a computer and she would help them, and that might be a good option. The librarian's wonderful, but some sort of outreach to educate the public on the fact that it is available and how to actually use it, because we do have a population that might not necessarily be able to access it. And you might want to, and I keep interrupting you, sorry, but you might even want to talk to the library because they do have computers there. And I know some of my neighbors go and use the computer for different things, and perhaps maybe they, that there could be a time or a place that even volunteers could go up there and help citizens who don't have computer access, who don't have access, because you're asking the people to do something that they can't do or have never done. We have an aging population in our town as well.
So there's a way around this. They can always call the city, and then one of our staff members will put it in. Whether they have an email address or not, we can provide them that request number, because everybody's got a phone. They can call back, give the request number, that can be looked at, and they can get updates that way.
Okay,
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay. I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think that there are a lot of things that aren't congruent with what city officials, not city officials, but workers say. And I don't think it's on purpose. I don't think that people are intentionally saying different things, but I just don't think that the process is streamlined when it's being presented to the public. Because I've even been told several different things myself, and I don't think it's intentional. I just don't think that
either.
it's.
And we are actually going to sit down. I've had conversations with Margaret to kind of, okay, we all have to be on the same page. And there are forms that they can fill out and I can input this stuff. That's not a problem, but that's a hurdle that we have to resolve from an internal standpoint. And we're working on that, like I said, with the problem she had with running the reports, and there were some issues of pulling up some documents.
I understand that. My thing is that there are some disgruntled citizens out there, and a lot of them are older citizens who have been here for a really long time. And they're not being told the same thing. And they're saying that it's the same thing all the time. And they get into this passiveness where they don't do anything then. And that's not fair to them. And so you don't have to say now or tell me what the solution is, but I think that a solution needs to be across the board, and everybody needs to be on the same page. That's just all I'm going to say.
The way to fix that,
You know
have
what?
them make an appointment with
Okay,
me
you know what?
directly.
I'm not, okay, and then that's fine, but it's not just my neighbors, and I'm not asking for something now. I'm just putting it on the
Yeah,
record that,
absolutely.
and I'm glad you're saying that everybody's trying to get on the same page, because that hasn't always been the case. And it hasn't even been the case since you've been here, if you've been here for 2 years. So that's, and it's not, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I'm not saying anything, because like I said, I don't think it's intentional. I just think it is.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Once he trains me, I will train the librarian.
Because she's a wonderful resource.
And we have a computer in City Hall that anyone can use, and we can help citizens here as well.
And perhaps maybe something in a water bill.
In the water bill, I was
Would be
thinking that.
beneficial. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just because this topic was up, I also have a question on that. Would a simple form here at City Hall or something like that?
We have one.
We do, okay, for the technology part of it. I mean, I know a lot of people just like filling out paperwork.
So just to be clear, so I understand, and that, so anybody listening, looking at this later, there is the option of the GoGov app, but it's not required. Somebody could come into City Hall, have a conversation with staff. Staff will document it and make sure it's routed the right way. Somebody could come in, fill out a form. Somebody can phone.
I'd
And-
say reasonably 2/3 of my complaints come that way.
Come which way? Yeah.
Somebody comes in, talks to
Yeah.
staff, they fill out the form.
Yeah.
The staff will email me on the city email. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I was a little discouraged with the lack of use. And I don't know if it's because people are afraid of the technology, they're unaware of it, whatever the case may be. But if there's a way, between your interactions, staff interactions, I mean, I'm open to any sort of new ideas to create that interface that makes it easier, no matter what your comfort level is with the technology.
Yeah, so we need to get the word out that there are a number of different ways. We want to make it as easy as possible. I know for me personally, the easiest way would be just pick up my phone and do that. But I know in my neighborhood, I think that there are a number of my neighbors, and we're using social media often. People aren't aware of the GoGov app. So I guess my point is just to say that I think we need to work on, to your point, making sure everybody knows that there are a number of different ways to notify City Hall of whatever the concern
Analog
is.
to digital, certainly fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Cover all gamuts.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I didn't know about the app.
you didn't know about
No, I
that?
didn't know about the app. Yeah, so.
I knew about that. I've never used it.
Any other public comments here from anybody in City Hall? Okay, let me see if there's anybody on Zoom with their hand raised. I don't think so, no? Okay, so I will go ahead and close this to public comment. And any other comments, questions, anything from the council?
I think if we have a consensus, that we just receive the report and thank our employee.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7.2 is to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with NBS for water and wastewater rate-related studies and services in an amount not to exceed $95,475.
This report came to the council the first meeting in March, and the council directed me to go out to RFP. And then at the last council meeting, the council by consensus asked me to bring it back to this council meeting for further discussion. And so it is back before the council for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any council comments, questions?
So I guess I poked the bear on this one and asked for it to be brought back. So I'll start on this particular piece that we find ourselves in a situation where we don't have a policy in place that identifies the threshold for an RFP. As a council, we've never given the city manager direction as to what a threshold should be for issuing an RFP. And we find ourselves in a position with some severely outdated studies and reports that create the nexus for any fee programs. We've identified that there's a gap. We know with our water rates that the city is currently subsidizing water rates through its general fund, and that's only getting worse by the day. The longer the time goes by, the greater the delta will be, the bigger challenge we'll have to address that and be able to pare that down. For me, that what I brought back last week was really three parts: this item, the next agenda item, but a caveat to tie that together is bringing forth as soon as possible a comprehensive procurement program or policy so that we can have solid guidance, so we can set the city manager and city staff up for success and have clear guidance. And so with that, I'd be happy to make a motion when you're ready, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council comments, questions?
I just want to say thank you for bringing this back.
I agree. Yeah, thank you. Councilmember McLaughlin. I'd like to open this now for public comment. Anybody here in City Hall that would like to comment?
Steve Pinotti, Plymouth, California. I don't know what you're going to find out by spending $95,000 to have someone tell you that you can raise your water rates or sewer rates. We have some of the highest sewer rates in the state of California, and you can look that up. And our water rates aren't really that cheap either. So between this and the next one, $136,000. I don't know.
Steve, if I can try to answer the question, in order to address anything in any type of rate, going up or going down, the state law requires these studies. So you have to quantify that all of your costs, because you're not to make money on a commodity. So that's the easy, simple answer. We could get longer ones.
She's right. If you read the packet, it's a very complicated issue, and it is by state law. We just can't arbitrarily say, okay, we're getting X amount of dollars additional water cost to us, so we're just gonna pass it on to the people in Plymouth. It doesn't work that way.
I understand, but you said also down. So our water rates could go down and sewer rates could go down. Is that what you're telling me?
I was using that as an example of you were doing any change. It is unlikely, since most of our sewer bill is debt service, and most of our water bill is not even covering what we're paying at this time to the water agency. That would be an unlikely scenario.
Any other comments from anybody here in City Hall? Okay, are there any comments from anybody on Zoom? Okay, thank you, Dana. So I'll now close this to public comment and ask the council one more time. Any other comments, questions? I'd like to entertain a motion.
First, Mr. Pinotti, thank you for your comments. And Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the water and wastewater rate studies plus connection fees to include the Prop 218 public hearing noticing with a contract for read the right recommendation. Authorizing expenditure not to exceed $95,475 for the professional services and authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement in a form approved by the city attorney with NBS.
I second it.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Sim,
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, item 7.3, authorize city manager to enter into an agreement with NBS in an amount not to exceed $37,575 for a citywide fee study and related services.
So this item too was before the council at the beginning of March, and I was directed for the RFP, bringing it back for by consensus of the council, and this will go through all of the regular city fees, not the impact fees, and not the water and sewer for the $37,575.
Thank you. Council discussion, comments?
Deja vu.
Right, ditto. I'd like to open this to public comment. Anybody here in City Hall who would like to make a comment, a public comment on this agenda item?
Good evening, council members, Mayor, Margaret. Stefan Horstreyer with Rita Sutherland. We heard that water and wastewater rates are high, and I think these two items, the first one and the second one, are kind of connected at the hip. We were, of course, the developer of Zinfandel Ridge. We still own Shenandoah Ridge, and we're trying to bring additional ratepayers into the system because, of course, with more ratepayers, the fixed cost gets divided differently. And I think that's really the solution to the high rates, that commodity rates that are being charged in Plymouth. So I would encourage you to look at this study of the nexus fees more as a guiding principle, looking to, not shut down growth, because I believe it's crucial for this town. And I know that over the past, 10 years since I've been here or longer, it was always appreciated that growth was seen as the solution to the problem. And I'd like to see that continue. I believe it's the best way forward for the ratepayers. And, these nexus impact fees, they are a tremendously important part of any calculation that a home builder or developer is looking at. They are one, construction cost, back of napkin calculation is construction cost, land value, and fees. Those are the three items that whenever you talk about selling or developing, that's what people look at. So I believe if you want to keep the commodity rates low, you've got to look at keeping the nexus fee within a reasonable amount. I understand, cost recovery is necessary, but there is certainly a variety of these nexus studies and the fees that you can justify based on nexus studies. And I would like to see it maybe even, recommended to the council to keep it on the lower end in order to bring necessary ratepayers into the city. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Stefan?
Yes.
These aren't the impact fees. The impact fees were approved a couple meetings ago,
I see.
but I will take your comments into my brain.
So these are
just citywide fees, like copying fees
Oh my goodness.
and those type of regular fees,
Yeah.
over the counter
Oh
fees.
my goodness. Okay.
But I heard you.
Well, yeah, your comments were helpful to me, so thank you. Is there anybody else here in City Hall who would like to comment on this? Okay, anybody on Zoom who would like to comment on this agenda item? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, thank you, Dana. So I'll go ahead and close this part of the public comment And would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll jump in. Make a motion to approve the expenditure not to exceed $37,575 for a city-wide user fee study and authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement and formed and approved by the city attorney with NBS.
I second that motion.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter. Aye. Vice Mayor Sim,
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 8, council or staff communications. We'll start with the city manager's report.
I only have one thing tonight. Shocking, I know. We have hired a new administrative analyst / deputy city clerk. She will start on Monday. Her name is Kelly Witt, and she previously worked for LAFCO. She had a previously scheduled vacation, so she's going to work a week, be gone a week, and then she'll be back. She will have the second office. So as you notice, we have a new office built. So it'll be Dana in the first office, Kelly Witt in the second office, Selby and Kathleen in that office, and then John Peabody and Scott in this office, which will also be used as a meeting space if we need a meeting space when either one of them aren't working. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Council member reports and requests for future agenda items. Councilmember McLaughlin.
Just a couple of reports. This last week, I sat down and had coffee with Cameron Begbie with Lava Dog, talking about our ambassador program. We had previously had conversations with Margaret about that, and what we're working is to try to find a way to take what is a great program and take it from being a passive body. And I define that as somebody identifies a project and then remembers that we have the ambassadors reaching out to something that's a bit more active, or leaning into where the group themselves are actually leaning into needs in our city, identifying needs to help leverage things forward. And Cameron has an interest in basically becoming a leader of the group to help facilitate that along, which could be really a great opportunity. Earlier today, I had a great conversation with our consultant that'll be facilitating our council workshop, and really look forward to that coming together. And I have a couple of things that aren't really agenda items, but I think are, want to put out is, I know we have an elected city clerk that I have never seen, and I know we've been short with our deputy city clerk, and I don't know what, if any way we can have, attendance. I don't know what the position is required or does. I know based on being elected, it's a different governance model, but I just, identified that, and that's not necessarily an agenda item piece, more of a question out. And then just as a follow-up with our water bill piece, can we itemize out our water bill to clearly delineate the debt service from what the actual water bill is? No?
We try to program it that way, and we couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
We will continue to try to make that work. Right now, we're trying to get year end to close. Once we get that to happen, we'll try again.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, just it would alleviate a lot of the misconceptions and questions about what our rates truly are. So thank you very much. That's all.
Councilmember White.
No future agenda items. I do, I got hired for an event for Operation Care this weekend. It was over at, now I can't even use the ambulance, Sutter Hill. Yes. And it was just a pretty unique event. I know that they had a couple representatives from Top Cop there. The sheriff's department was there, Jackson PD was there, and just an interesting organization.
Very cool. Councilmember Kleinfelter.
Well, as everybody knows, I've been attending the regional League of California Cities meetings, and I do think I'm overloading everyone with our action alerts, but the legislature is really busy right now, and it's incredibly important for us to have a voice or skin in the game. The league is very good at vetting some of those action alerts, but we don't have to agree with all of them either. It's our policy that matters. I will be in Reading for another meeting, May 19th, for another onsite. And I encourage you, even though it looks like there's a lot of action alerts, please read them. On future agenda items, I would like to see a discussion of utilizing some of our TOT funds for a downtown beauty project, or to get some more flowers done, which also could be accomplished out of Parks and Recreation. But like John had mentioned, the sale, and we need new banners desperately and the hardware for that. So, and I did want to bring up the action alert again, because I'd like it agendized for discussion by the council for the 4 bills that we received an alert on. So I know there was another one, but I've forgotten. Thank you.
Councilmember Soon.
A little curious as to why our farmers market doesn't start so late in the summer, but having said that, apparently between now and then we have the 4th of July event, and nothing prior to that. I would like to next council meeting maybe bring another function forward, maybe in early June, some type of a event downtown. Wouldn't cost a lot of money. Have some music, and perhaps get Rotary to do a beer and wine feature as well, and on a Friday night. Talking to Francine Ramos, who is willing to help me, who owns Thick Barn, and she's willing to help me put some together for a Friday night in June. So I'll bring that together. I'll bring something to the next meeting.
Okay, you know how much I like the idea of food truck Fridays. So every Friday. So
Could I suggest a chili cook-off showdown?
Oh. Fast dude, keep checking it out.
Oh,
I heard there might be a third contestant in this event. Perhaps, maybe not.
bring it on.
Bring it. That's all I had.
I had the opportunity on Tuesday, I sat down and had coffee with Justin Howard, the executive director of ACRA, and to talk about how could we bring more activities to Plymouth. He had a lot of really good suggestions, things that are already going on in other areas of town. And I think a number of these are really feasible. What I would like to do is follow up and send him an email, and I'll CC Margaret about some of the things that we talked about, because, and then I thought what I would do is put out a poll in the Facebook groups to get some feedback from the community of who would be interested in what, some of the things that he talked about. But before I go into this list, I want to say that afterwards, I realized that these are pretty much adult based. So we would be open to more suggestions that involve our younger members of the community, but things like trivia night, yoga in the park, circuit training, Thursday night cornhole with music, pop-up pickleball, dance classes, things for the seniors, water aerobics, lap swimming. So I thought those were some really good things that are feasible to bring to the community. I also want to mention what Councilmember Kleinfelter was saying about the action alert. I'm happy. When I first saw this, I thought, oh yeah, this looks great. And this most recent action alert has to do with fentanyl crisis legislation, which I'm sure a lot of people know is a subject very near and dear to my heart because of how how fentanyl has impacted our family. And as I was reading through these 4 bills, proposed legislation, I thought, wow, I personally could get behind 2 of them, but for me personally, there are 2 of them that I don't feel like I could personally support. However, that's me as an individual. And so I would encourage everybody, and I have the analyses on these bills, to really read the bill. So we really understand exactly what we'd be supporting. And it's not about how I feel personally, although I'm happy to share that outside of this meeting, why I feel certain ways on one way or another. But I would encourage everybody to read these bills before we, as a council, make a decision what our letter is going to look like.
But just dovetailing onto that, I mean, I think it's, I absolutely support. And what I'm thinking is, I mean, I was the ledge director for California Fire Chiefs for 6 years. And this stuff moves fast, changes fast, is dynamic. What if we had a standing agenda item that we would basically, as you're putting the agenda in, we'd plug in if we have to take action on or not, right? So that we are in a position, if we're going to put together a letter of support, it doesn't require us asking, and now in 2 weeks from now, it would be put on, but rather having a standing legislative piece. And if there's none, we could say none, right? Or, but if something comes up like these fentanyl bill packages, it'd be as simple as plugging that in and attaching it. And then we can be more nimble in our ability to either, weigh in support, in opposition, or whatever the case may be. Just a thought. And I'm sure there's legal repercussions. There's always legal.
We could probably work on something like that. It's just a question of how much specificity we would need, based on what's going on and what we'd have to say in the actual agenda. But I think we could probably work on something that would be able to.
I mean, almost something that would be broad, where report to staff, or provide direction to staff, or something tying into that. Because what you basically, I mean, I could see is we'd want, as a city, we'd want to put in a letter of support.
Yeah.
Or we'd want to put it into a letter to oppose. I don't know what it would look like. I'm pulling it out of my hat, but it just may be a way of keeping it in the forefront of our minds, and we'd be more leaning into it. I mean, Valerie's doing great work in getting this information, pulling it back for us, and now we need to be nimble enough to be able to be responsive before the votes come. Otherwise, the letter has no weight. So
yeah, we could maybe consider that. Probably I hate to say it, I hate to grind everything to a halt, but you should probably have a separate agenda discussion regarding an agenda item like that on a go forward basis, because there's probably a lot of different ways to think about it. And then from there, we can move more efficiently after that.
Sorry. No, I appreciate the comments. I possibly have a request for a future agenda item, or perhaps just a discussion. But an idea that I have is a suggestion as a council, and with the support of city staff, could we consider maybe in the next month or two, creating some type of almost a state of the city report for our citizens? And maybe we just do that during an agenda item. And if it were up to me, I'd like to see input from each council member on what you'd like to see on that report, as well as city staff. And so it's something we'd work on collaboratively and get that out there to our citizens.
I remembered my number 3. So I wanted to recognize the comment we listened to from Stephanie Moreno during public comment. And even though it is not really our jurisdiction to tell people where to lock up or not to lock up, there is a great deal of public interest right now in this particular issue. And it may be that we can provide them a voice. You know, let's be communicators with them so they feel there's a place to say what needs to be said, how it affects the community. That was my 3rd.
It's on my to-do list for first thing in the morning before I head home.
I have to agree with Councilmember Kleinfelter that that playground raised me. You know, and I know there's a lot of people in the community that own shoe hoops and everything of that nature. I've always had a confusion. I know that piece of property belongs to the school district, but it doesn't.
I think it belongs to the state of California.
That's what I was thinking. That it was the fairgrounds.
There's
So,
a lot of moving parts.
yeah.
But we can give people a voice.
Mhm.
I agree with that. Anything else, anybody? Okay, the meeting's adjourned.